All right, it's Thursday, December 12th. I'm just getting plugged in here. Don't usually go to the office on Thursdays, but we're doing a Christmas thing, so just within the team. So that's going to be kind of cool. Be my first time doing that with the team. My team prior, Microsoft, basically everyone was remote, so this thing has been beeping too much. We're not doing that this drive. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited. Holy crap, my neighbor's got a ton of stuff. Let's do this. Okay, we're taking a detour. This is nuts. One sec. We don't usually go this way. Ready? Get ready for it, because it's coming. I don't know if you guys can see out there, but it gets crazier. Look at this yard. Oh my goodness. Anyway, back to reality. I just got to loop around here. I think that was worth it. Jeez, I got a topic today. I feel like I either missed a couple comments, so I apologize, because I thought I had a handful more to go through. And I thought I marked them, but I can't seem to find them. So I just had a quick check on Reddit under r/experienced devs, which I always think has something interesting to kind of look at. And one of them, I didn't even read through the post. I just read through the title and figured I'd give my opinion on it. It's actually something I talk about a lot. And I figured it'd be pretty relevant. So the topic is going to be about how to give, or how to help, I guess, junior developers without just giving them the answer. And yeah, I really like talking about this topic because I think there's coaching from two sides on it. As an engineering manager, this is something I've spent a lot of time coaching people on. I'm not here to say like I have a perfect solution and I know best. Hopefully, if you've seen other videos of mine by now, hopefully you get the impression that I'm not here to tell you like I know more than everyone else or my way's the best way, but these are just from my experiences. So friendly reminder that if you want questions answered, please just leave a comment below the video. Happy to kind of go through your topic. And if you want something that's a little bit more involved and you don't want to write out details in public, feel free to find Dev Leader on social media and just shoot me a message and just let me know that you want it on Code Commute. You'd like it to be anonymous, and you can blast stuff away. I've talked about this before, but I had an engineering manager, write me a huge email with tons of details to kind of talk through my perspective on it. And of course, we kept it anonymous because why would I not do that? But the more detail helps me answer more specifically. The less detail, I have no choice but to give really generic answers. So let's dive into it. So I did mention I want to talk about this from two different perspectives. We have one as the more junior person asking for help. I'm probably going to start off on this side. And the second part, I'm covered in dog or cat hair. Holy crap. I wonder if the cat jumped into the dryer or something. This is like freshly clean. Anyway, we'll go through from the junior engineer's perspective what they can try to do, and then from the more senior person's perspective how to kind of coach them around it, because it is a bit of a trap when you're getting a little bit overwhelmed as a more senior engineer trying to help juniors. If you don't have experience with it, you can kind of make the situation worse or perpetuate it, I guess. And good news is I had a fever yesterday, and overnight, like, I slept way better than the night before. So I think I'm on the way to getting better here. But now my throat's like it's not sore, but I don't know, little tickle periodically. So I might cough. I apologize. So from the junior engineer's perspective, what can we do? I think something that's really difficult for junior engineers to balance, and it's not like, I don't blame them. It's difficult for some people that aren't even juniors. It's like, how do you balance your time between trying things out versus getting unblocked? And like we have tools like time boxing things to be able to kind of help us out with that. But if you think about it, we have two sides to this spectrum here where it's like, okay, if you don't do any work, you can get unblocked as fast as possible if you just like get assigned a task and go ask for help, right? Because basically you have someone else doing your work. It sounds exaggerated because it is, but that's one end of the spectrum. The exact opposite end of the spectrum is you say, I'm not going to ask anyone for help at all, right? So I am accepting that I could potentially be blocked indefinitely if I can never come up with a solution. But at least I will be going to learn, and I will be trying things out. I will be, being, I don't know, like some type of proactive in terms of like trying to solve the problem. But both ends of this, of these, like the extreme ends of this spectrum are not super great, right? And I think that, and it's going to vary from scenario to scenario, but there's probably somewhere in the middle that feels pretty good. And that's why I was saying we have a tool, time boxing. If you're not totally sure, like you can always try to implement time boxing. You can ask for clarity on roughly how long something should take, right? If you're not sure, someone's like, here's a task, and you're like, okay, what's your expectation for, how I should be progressing through this in terms of timelines? Nothing wrong with that. People might not be able to give you a solid, concrete answer. My apologies, sorry for coughing. But at least you might have a guideline, right? Someone might say, okay, well, if you have to go look into this, I'd probably spend a day or two on it. And you should, by the end of day 2, you should be able to have something up for code review. Or by the end of the week, have something up for code review. And that should mean that if you're not trending towards that you should be asking for help. Okay, so like the time boxing part sort of gives you this constraint that you should be working within, because that is apparently an expectation if you've tried to clarify it. And again, like depending on your level and stuff too, you can time box stuff. You don't have to have someone tell you what the time box is. You could go approach things, like if you have very open-ended problems to solve, you can say like, we might never arrive at the best, ultimate, 100% perfect solution, because surprise, in real life, there's not really any such thing. And instead of just wasting time trying to like go from like 95% effective to 96% effective, that's going to take an extra month or something, instead of being ridiculous like that, you could just say, we're going to time box it, and like, we're going to have to revisit this later, or it's going to change later anyway, whatever. We have other priorities. We have to shift gears. Let's time box it so we can get something done, make a lot of progress, and then move on to the next priority. So as a junior, I think it's really helpful to try and get some time boxing constraints in place. Sometimes this might be kind of built into how your development team works. So if you have a sprint and your team is, pretty structured around sprint commitments and stuff, that can be helpful. So they'll say like, okay, you have maybe you have 1 or 2 work items to do in a sprint, and the sprint is 2 weeks long. So the expectation is that, and let's just pretend they're equal size, right? In terms of effort, you would do one in the first week and the other in the second week. So you have a week for each. So again, giving you some type of constraint around how to approach your work. But the next part of this that I want to talk about is really around like what you do, I guess, and how you approach asking for help. So what I always say to people is like, if you're going to go ask for help, assume that this is the very first question you're going to get from the person you're asking. They're going to say back to you, what have you tried so far? So if you came to me and said, Nick, I'm stuck on this, I would want to say, well, what have you tried so far? And there's a couple of ways that this can go, right? If you haven't tried anything, is it because you're not actually sure what you're being asked to do? So I call this like lacking clarity. And honestly, I would say if you're lacking clarity, I wouldn't waste any time. I would ask for help immediately. So someone's given you a task to do, and they're like, okay, team, go off and be awesome and go do your work. And, that's what we're doing for the sprint, whatever your team happens to do, right? And you're like, I got this task and I literally don't even know what it's supposed to be. Instead of disappearing for 2 weeks and then at the end going, yeah, I didn't even know what this was about. Right away, like immediately ask for clarity on what it is. Because even if you make assumptions about what it is, what if those are the wrong assumptions, right? You're literally just going to waste time either by not knowing and not doing anything, or by thinking when it's the wrong thing. So if you don't have clarity, ask for help and clarity immediately. Get that out of the way. There's no point spending any time being blocked on just not understanding. That's part one. Now, if you were to answer that question of what have you tried so far, and you said nothing, but it's just because, and it's not because you didn't have clarity, so you understand what the task is, you just haven't done anything. This is where I would say, well, don't ask for help yet, right? You understand what the challenge is. You understand what's being asked of you. You understand the task at hand. Go try something, right? It's a good, in my experience so far doing this, it's been a really good cue for people to think like, if I'm getting stuck, but I haven't even attempted anything yet, maybe I should do that. It's also helping the person you're trying to ask for help, because let's say you have tried something, right? Like, so if they're not even asking you this question, you should be prepared to answer it, is what I'm trying to say, sorry. And the reason for that is that if you've tried one or two things, instead of going, imagine you're messaging someone online about this, okay? These people are cutting into the fast lane and it's not safe because they're not going fast. So let's pretend you're messaging someone on your team. So you're the junior person, they're more senior, and you message them and you're like, hey, like I'm working on this task and I'm stuck. If they don't lead with what have you tried so far, and they just start offering advice, what that probably looks like is that you're like, oh, well, yeah, I've tried that. Or they start walking you down this path, and then you realize, 20 minutes into it, you're like, oh, yeah, like I've already tried that. So you can short circuit a lot of that wasted time, either by them ideally asking you, what have you tried so far, or you letting them know, I've tried option A, B, and C, and here's the outcomes of doing those. Here's why I'm stuck, right? Because sometimes you get stuck because you're like, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be doing option A and it's not working. So number one, is there something I'm missing about option A? Or number two, is there an option B that I should have been trying out? Maybe an option C? So having these other options or missing something, it's kind of a scenario that can happen. Or say you try all three. You have three options that you're considering. You try all three of them and you're like, hey, they all work. But in this scenario, there's three things that work, but they're all slightly different in terms of outcome or complexity or design patterns. And you might say, well, okay, like I got two options or three options that work, in my opinion, right? It's not like having zero options. You actually have potentially too many options that work. So you could be working with someone more senior to kind of say, like, how do we like narrow the gap here out of these options? Which one should we be going with, right? You might say, hey, this option B is going to take longer to do, but I think it's actually going to be worth it in the long term. It's more flexible, extensible, testable, but it's going to take twice as long. And the more senior person might say, yeah, but like, if we get that first one done, like in terms of priority, we're probably not coming back to this for a long time. We have other things that like need to get attention. So like, it's not like the first option sucks. It's just that it's not as extensible. We're okay living with that. These are trade-offs that you could and should be having conversations about. So, again, like having the examples of what you've tried so far is really helpful. I don't know why there's so much traffic right here. This is ridiculous. So I'm in the fast lane, and like there's a price to be in the fast lane. So when it's not moving, it feels like really silly because I'm paying money and the people to the right of me are actually moving faster than I am, and they're not paying anything. It feels really backwards. I know this isn't going to make sense like economically, but like in terms of traffic patterns, I feel like instead of having a lane that's paid for, what they should do is when the traffic backs up, they should just open another lane. Better yet, why don't they just keep the damn thing open all the time? The other side of the road actually has, like coming back home, there is an additional lane. Well, I mean, the shoulder is basically a drivable lane. And sometimes they'll turn on a sign that's like shoulders open for traffic. So you just get an extra lane of driving. The congestion goes way down. Imagine that. Express toll lanes, $15. Silly. Anyway, that's the price of commuting, to be sitting in traffic. But we get to hang out together, right? So that's fun. I would also want to remind people too that if you're junior, like don't shy away from asking for help. Like this can't be said enough, I think. So we talked about a couple things to consider when asking for help, right? So making sure you've tried some things. If you need clarity, getting clarity right away, time boxing things, like absolutely time box things. Ask for help on how to time box things if you're not sure, right? If it's not built into the regular development effort, try to ask someone more senior, your manager, and you can kind of get the rhythm of like sort of the size of different effort level of different work items that you're doing. But at the end of the day, there should be some mechanism that you feel comfortable with for asking for help. Whether that's going to someone that you have like an onboarding buddy that's been set up to work with you, or there's someone on the team that you're building more rapport with, like anything, even your manager, right? Like just making sure that you have some way to go ask for help. Now, to give you an example, there's people that are on my team, and the way my team is set up, I have separate feature crews, which are just like teams within the team that are much smaller because they work on different service areas. And sometimes like those service areas are, in terms of like the number of people, are quite small. And as someone's getting ramped up, especially, they're like, I spend a lot of time with them because we're talking about being new to Microsoft, how things work and all this stuff. So it's good. Like they get comfortable. It seems like they get comfortable quickly being able to ask me questions and stuff like that. So what ends up happening is, especially from like a HR managerial perspective, like lots of questions and stuff come in. What's the expectation for this, that? How do we do this, that? But then as I start becoming more technical, these individuals are still very comfortable asking me questions, but there like is always going to be a point where it's going to exceed my technical understanding because I'm not actively working in the code base. So it's not like I get bothered when they ask me. So if it's something more technical than I understand, like, hey, like where in the code is this, or what pattern are we using here or there? How do I configure this file for these settings and stuff? Like these are going to be things that I might not have any exposure to. So then I have to redirect them. But the point is that they at least had someone or a mechanism that they were comfortable with to go ask for help, because it's so much more challenging when people just are not comfortable asking for help. I had a whole code commute. I don't even know what the topic was, but a whole code commute episode where I was talking about, like, my experience has been that when people are onboarding, whether it's like interns or new hires, the people that are comfortable asking for help, getting unblocked, they onboard so much more quickly and effectively versus the people that are not comfortable reaching out. Oh, that is not good. Oh boy, that's oh, my wife likes these emergency things, like Emergen-C for vitamin C. Oh boy, they don't taste good at all. But to make it worse, I one of my early Code Commute episodes was about caffeine ingestion. So like I don't drink coffee, and I have a bit of a history ingesting too much caffeine over long periods of time. So I believe that I've been diagnosed with narcolepsy, and I believe personally that it's because of like very high amounts of caffeine taken daily for years, like a gram to a gram and a half of caffeine for years. So I have pure caffeine powder that I add to things, but if you've never tasted pure caffeine powder, it's extremely bitter. So when you add it to anything, it makes it taste pretty bad. So like if I have flavor packets and stuff, I know roughly what it's going to taste like when I add caffeine to it. But I forgot that like Emergen-C is not really that flavorful to begin with, so it's just like it's not good. But hey, that'll help me sip on the caffeine and keep it going throughout the workday, which is ironically one of the funny challenges that I've had in the past, which was like I had essentially an unlimited supply of caffeine. So if I was working, if I just needed more caffeine, like I didn't have to sip it. I could chug caffeine and say, I want more. And I would just have more. Because caffeine is extremely inexpensive. I don't think people realize how inexpensive pure caffeine is. Like pounds of caffeine. Like I think the last time I bought caffeine, I think was 4 pounds of pure caffeine, and I think it was like $120 or something. Like that's an insane amount. If you were to have, you could do the math on it, but like if you're going to take 200 milligrams of caffeine a day, which is like just over 3 cups of coffee, roughly, maybe approximately 3 cups, that would last you like over a decade, right? It's a long time. So very inexpensive. Anyway, that doesn't taste good. Let's shift gears to that's a tickle. You gotta get that tickle out. Shift gears to the people giving the help, right? It's gonna sound very similar, so we're gonna lean into this idea that we want to be asking people what they've tried so far. So the trap that I wanted to revisit here is that when you're a more senior developer, and you don't have to be like literally have the title senior or principal, staff, whatever, you could still be a junior engineer, but you happen to have more experience than the person asking for help, right? What you might notice that happens with some individuals is that they're asking for help, and initially you're like, okay, whatever, that's fine. And then they're asking for help again, and you're like, oh, okay. And then they ask for help again, and you're like, okay, like I know I'm supposed to help this person, but now I'm feeling like distracted, like I can't get my own stuff done. And it keeps happening. So what you want to keep doing is giving them the answer right away so that they go away right away. So someone comes over to you and they're like, hey, I'm stuck on this. And you're like, oh, like like this used to happen a lot in person. You could like literally stand up, go to their keyboard and type the line of code and be like, that's how, bye, right? And then go back to your work. Now, I had an experience when I was like newly a manager, and when we were at this startup that I was at before Microsoft, and we were onboarding people, like this is how I learned this the hard way. I reached a point, and I'm not talking about this, I don't want it to sound like I'm boasting about myself. This is literally just the product of being in this environment. But I reached a point where I would have my entire workday my entire workday was just walking from person to person that was stuck on stuff. So as I was helping someone, like, this is in person, someone else would be like, oh, when you're done, like, can you help me with this? Like, no problem, okay. And all that I was doing was basically giving people the answers to things. Now, I used to work a ton, like long days at this startup. So my entire regular workday got to a point where it was literally just going between person and person. And I had to get my own work done before the office sort of got people in it, and then at night. So it's a trap, because when you give people the answers, they're not actually learning effectively for themselves. So you know what that means they're learning? They're learning, and like, it's not malicious, but they're learning that when they're stuck, they can get an answer from you. They're learning that they can get unblocked immediately. It's quick. It feels very effective, right? I'm stuck. I know if I just put my hand up, I get the answer. So in order to make this situation better, we have to kind of do something that feels backwards, which is like, unfortunately, spend more time with people. Which feels like it sucks, because if you're already reaching this point where you're like, oh man, like, why they're asking for help again, or I have a couple people asking for help, and like, now I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. I got bad news. It's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better, but it will get better. And my thought process around this is like, spend the little bit of extra time with them to teach them, right? So instead of giving them the answer and trying to get away as fast as possible, try to spend that time where you're like, okay, so you're stuck on this. Okay, well, where did you look in the code? Okay, cool. Like, show me. Okay, great. So when you're like, what other patterns in the code did you see? Oh, you didn't see any? Okay. Do you know how to go find those patterns? Okay, no? Okay, well, can you think conceptually, maybe we can sit down and talk through a couple of spots in the code that have a behavior like this. Oh, that's right. You recall this other spot. Cool. Do you know where that is in the code? No? Okay, well, how might you go look for that? Like, I know you don't know right now, but could you think of some keywords to use? Right? And basically just like asking people more questions back to them to get them to think through it. Obviously, I was just making up a totally random example off the top of my head, but like, the idea there wasn't, oh, here's where you go, here's the thing, here's the answer, click this, click that. It's getting them, like, asking them the questions back. And as you might have been able to guess from how I was explaining that in that really brief, contrived example, is like, it's probably going to take a lot more time. You're going to have to be patient with people because they're new and they're exploring. But I guess I can't guarantee anything, but I can tell you, at least from my experience, this has been transformative with this kind of thing. The person was going like under the speed limit in the fast lane, and I didn't realize until everyone was passing us, like kind of swerving in and out. Funny. Haha. So I think that's like one of the, in my opinion, one of the most important takeaways when you're on the more senior side, giving the help to the juniors, is try to steer away from giving answers like directly. It's a bit of a trap. Man, that Maserati looks good. From the back, yeah. Otherwise, it's pretty crap. It's a Maserati SUV. It almost looked like it had a wide body or something, like the fenders in the back were nice and wide, but the rest of it looks kind of garbage. Okay. Oh my goodness. What else can we say from the more senior side? If people come in to ask for help, you're trying to coach them more. I want to mention patience again. I think that's it's critical. this is one of those things I think where, like, when I talk about soft skills and stuff, like, I think this is a really good example. We have to, like, even having the awareness that if you're just giving people answers is, like, not going to be beneficial long term. I think these are things that, like, if your soft skills are in tune, you could probably pick up on this pretty quick. Like, for me, it took a little while early in my career. They put me into a manager position because they felt my soft skills were good. So it still took me a little bit. But yeah, I think, like, it's gonna feel challenging if you're not patient, and especially if you've let it go on for too long, where people have really figured out they can come to you, and you're already feeling like, oh, I'm drowning, like, I gotta get out of this, like, I need to kind of steer these people away. Maybe something else worth mentioning too is, like, this is like a bit of meta to consider, and I think that there's ways to balance this without, like, totally dismissing people. So I haven't fully formed this thought, but this is kind of, I think, maybe an interesting approach. I think this will be more applicable for more people that are even more senior. Okay, so when you're helping out more junior engineers, like, this can actually be a really good, like, growth opportunity for you. Okay, so it doesn't matter your level. When you're helping out other people, this can be a really good growth opportunity because you're practicing different sets of skills. You're helping other people get better. It's not just, like, coding. So these are really good things to be able to lean into. Now, let's jump ahead a few levels. Okay, so not only are you not a junior engineer that's offering another junior engineer help, you're either senior or, like, principal and staff level. Okay, so your time is extremely valuable, and that's not to say that helping someone else is not extremely valuable. But there's this interesting thing that can happen, because if you think about the different types of things in career growth that you want to be focusing on, ideally a principal or staff level engineer has been demonstrating for a large part of their career that they're able to help mentor and guide and unblock more junior engineers. It's part of, like, at least in everything I've seen, expectations that we have of people at this level. But that means in order to get there, when they were at levels that were below that, so even senior, right, they needed to have those opportunities. Oh man, that part of the highway is really dumb when you have, like, someone driving extremely slow and you're, like, trying to merge over the lanes, like, because you can't see it, but there's this right lane up here and it gets completely backlogged. I don't really know why. But, like, if people in front of you are going slow, you basically can get trapped in that lane, and it's to go on a different highway. And, like, I don't want to be trapped over there and not be able to merge over. Okay, so when you are in this position, depending on your team structure and stuff, hopefully there are people that are senior, right? But they're senior, they're more junior than you as a principal or staff level engineer. So when you have, say, someone that is very junior and they're asking for help, you actually no, you're not merging into here. You can't do that. You would literally be driving into my car if you tried to do that. You could be creating these opportunities for the other engineers. Okay, so, and again, I'm not telling you, this is why I wanted to be careful how I said this. I'm not saying, hey, anytime a junior asks you a question, you just completely dismiss them or tell them, go talk to this other person. You still want to be able to help, and the more junior engineers are really going to appreciate your time, right? For them, it's, you might not realize this, but for the more junior engineers, it's really cool that they can get your time. They know your experience. They really look up to you. So it is a really cool opportunity for them. But you can try to balance some of your time. And if say you have a design that you have to be working on, or you're in the middle of some project that's taking up a lot of time coordinating between other teams and stuff, you might be able to essentially say like to one of the seniors, hey, like this person on the team needs some help. Like, could you give them some guidance on this, right? And then you're not leaving the more junior person stranded, but you're actually delegating some of that time to someone else on the team that could actually benefit from that experience of helping other people. So something to consider. I know that at staff and principal levels, it can be challenging to balance a lot of what's going on. Right? We got fires we got to put out. We got long-term architectural vision we want to deliver on. We got cross-team collaborations. You have all of the more junior engineers, which is basically everyone on the team, that need help. They need to be skilled up. Like, they need growth opportunities. So there's a lot going on. I just got a glare from this woman crossing the street. I obviously see you. I'm obviously gonna stop, I think. So yeah, that might be something if you are more senior and you're having difficulty balancing your time. Trying to, like, delegation in general is a skill that you want to be able to have at that level, but you could be delegating even when people are asking for help. One more, like, I'm very close to the office here. One more thing, just with all of this stuff. I know it's a weird thing to say. I'm not a huge fan of documentation because I find like there's so much work that goes into keeping it up to date that it's like you put in all this effort and it's still out of date. But I think it's because you need a culture around keeping it up to date. And I find that's really difficult. So if you're in an org that really values that, something that you could be considering too is if people are asking for help, make creating documentation for it, depending what the issue is, right? Like, make creating documentation for that situation part of the process of giving that help. If it's like a very specific, like, hey, we're working on this feature kind of thing, like, that might not make any sense to document what's going on because, I don't know, like, it's very situational. But if someone was like, hey, I'm having difficulty getting my environment set up, or I'm having difficulty working with this external resource, it seems to be having issues. Like, okay, how do we debug it? How do we diagnose it? How do we correct it? Instead of the next person getting stuck on this and having to come ask for help, when guiding someone through this, making sure they've tried some things out, you're giving them, ultimately they're arriving at the answer, go document it. And when I say go document it, I mean maybe have them go write up the documentation. Right? Have the people that are getting the help be responsible for helping create documentation for the next person. I've seen this work out really well with some of the guys on my team that started earlier this year. They took it upon themselves because we said, when you're onboarding, if the docs are out of date, go update them, please. Like, you're only going to help the next person. And they did that beyond the onboarding docs, which is great. They were like, hey, I'm working in this feature area now, and I got stuck because some of the documentation was missing or a little bit out of date, so I updated it. And then the next person came through and they were like, oh, I used this documentation and it was awesome. So, like, these are things that you're paying a different cost, right? If you want to go document it, you might find that keeping documentation up to date is less overhead. In my experience, it just hasn't been that way. But hey, like, it's just another option, right? So I'm throwing this one out there as something to consider. Yeah, just another idea. I like to think that if you have a bunch of different options and tools that you can leverage, then you might find situations for them, right? So even though I'm saying, hey, I'm not a huge fan of documentation, it always feels like it's out of date, I also gave you an example where it actually worked really well on our team. So when you have a bunch of different tools, you have more tools you can use in different scenarios, right? If I only had one tool to use, then You know, I can't use a hammer for everything. I mean, maybe you could. Maybe you could. Using a hammer to screw in a screw is probably not impossible, but maybe not what you want to do. But I think that's it. I hope that was helpful. I think it's a really important part of like kind of learning how to navigate that kind of stuff, because it can be a bit of a trap, right? So I hope that if you were on either side of that, the more senior end or on the more junior end, that like you listen to both sides of that and you could see how to navigate it, right? So just more perspective overall. But I am at the office. We'll do a video on the way back. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Take care.